Welcome to Voices of GFLI, the podcast where we hear directly from members of the Global Feed LCA Institute. In this series, we explore how trusted environmental data is shaping a more sustainable future for the animal feed industry. Our guests share how they use the GFLI database in practice, how it supports their sustainability goals, and why credible, consistent metrics matter more than ever. This is the Voices of GFLI, where data, insight, and impact come together.
My name is Lode. I'm working for Kemin, which is a supplier of additives in the agricultural industry. I started there in the summer of 2023, and I'm responsible for sustainability within the EMEA region. So that includes performing life cycle assessments, as well as ESG reporting and a number of other topics within that context. Before GFLI, I worked as a consultant on sustainability, working for a number of companies in Belgium and abroad. Yeah. No, I think it's a very good question. Maybe to start off, why we are a member. If I would just summarize it in short, is because sustainability is important for us as a company, and second to that is we know we cannot do it on our own. So we need a platform to collaborate with, let's say, with other members in the industry. And then why GFLI specifically is because when we look at the environmental impact, it is important to address it in a scientific way, in a way which follows a number of standards and which is trustworthy. And I think GFLI touches all of those elements, which means that if we as an industry can all agree upon how we're going to do things, it will push us all in the right direction. So Kemin was one of the earliest members, and the TMC, just for the audience, is let's say a place where a lot of great people with a lot of experience come together and kind of debate and have an open discussion on, how are we going to fill in this vision? How do we make sure that we are in line also with other standards? How do we continue to grow as an organization and make sure that we can get everyone along and that we can add value to everyone who would use the data in the future? So for Kemin specifically, or for me specifically, well, it's interesting for me because a lot of the players and the members of TMC come from the agricultural industry, like for instance feed mills and so on, but we specifically focus on additives. So having our voice on those aspects is also interesting for us to bring that also to the table and to the debates. And overall, it's also just from networking quite interesting to get in contact with all of those experts in the field and to look at how they consider certain topics. No, absolutely. So indeed, as you mentioned, we have the commercial license, which allows us to basically use the data. Today, we have one team member who has access to the database, and she uses it for a number of things. Partially to perform our own life cycle assessments, but also partially to help our commercial team, because that's maybe interesting to mention is a producer of additives. So we use a lot of chemical materials as well as as minerals and so on. Not typically the type of, let's say, ingredients that we will find in the GFLI database today. But we sell our products to feed mills, for instance, so we can have an impact on a compound feed. So that means if you use a precision feed or an enzyme or an amino acid, you might want to reformulate your diet, and then based with the GFLI database and our own LCAs, we can now tell our clients, well, just for instance, use our product and the greenhouse gas emissions from your compound feed can be reduced with let's say 10%. So that's really why we use the GFLI database, because it's a trusted source for us to also showcase the impact that an additive our products can have. No, I think that's indeed a very good question, because when I think of GFLI, the first thing that comes to mind for me is performing life cycle assessments. But there can be a link with CSRD as well. So CSRD is a directive, a piece of legislation that requires a lot of companies like ours to report on environmental, social, and other aspects. So that a lot of topics, but one of those topics is climate change. I would argue it's one of the most important topics, and there's a lot of things that we need to report on from a qualitative point of view. Usually that's referred to like scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. And for most companies, scope 3 is the most impactful one. Scope 1 and 2 is how and what you produce yourself, the energy which you use. Scope 3 is everything within the value chain, before and after you as a company. So for many companies, that's like 90% of their total greenhouse gas emissions. And for a lot of companies, a very big part of that is the ingredients that they source. And that's where it all comes together. So as a company, you can use GFLI, or in our case, GFLI and other databases, to kind of see what is the environmental impact of the ingredients that we source. So it can be a reliable database to help you set up your carbon emissions and see and report in a correct way on the CSRD in general. Well, for us specifically, the limitation is the, let's say, amount of data that is on there. I think, for some users, it will probably work perfectly. For us as a producer of additives, it's still a bit limited. So that's of course something that we hope in the future will be broadened a little bit. It's not going to be that easy, because it's also a completely other set of let's say, ingredients and values that we have to go to the database, but at least I hope it goes in that direction for sure. For us, it's important to have a trustworthy database where we can find the values that we need to perform, for instance, our own life cycle assessments. For me, the value of GFLI is that it's independent, but still it's our industry that kind of comes together and sit down and discuss, let's say, what are the rules we will all follow, and that's quite valuable. And I think that combination of the fact that it's trustworthy and independent really allows us to just use it and feel comfortable about using it. Well, I'm thinking of one improvement and let's say one innovation. Basically, when it comes to improvements, I think it's now, let's say, really the bigger players were the first members, but we need to get everyone on board. If GFLI is to continue to be a success and to grow as a success, I think the most important thing is that also smaller members or later members can easily get on the platform. And I think the most important thing there is going to be ease of use. Ease of use meaning the easier it is for someone to join, the easier it is for someone to understand what it entails, to get like more information on topics, the better. That can be from a software point of view, that can be all of these kind of things will really help. And I think GFLI in general is doing a good job, but that's, let's say, I think can be a key focus point moving forward to get everyone on board. Everyone who hesitates, just make it easy for them, make it the straightforward choice, let's say, to jump on. I think when it comes to innovations, there's multiple things that can be done also from a technological point of view and so on. But I would think the most important thing is just to make it, let's say, I would call it seamless. Don't have a specific way of saying what that means, but at the end of the day, we need to be able to share information in a value chain, in an industry. Today, you see some software tools, you see formulation tools to formulate the feed, you see software tools which are specialized on calculating environmental impacts down the value chain, and so on and so on. And then, of course, you have GFLI, which is a database, which can be a central point. The way that all of those work together and the most seamless it becomes, I would say would be the best. So you know that there's a lot of players using different tools. So if everyone can just use GFLI in the way that they used to use their tool, either integrated in an easy way to combine those, I think that is really the future for GFLI. No, you're very welcome, and thank you for this conversation. I'm rooting for GFLI.
Thanks for tuning in to Voices of GFLI. If you're inspired by what you've heard, be sure to follow us and explore more stories from across the global feed community. Together, we're driving transparency, collaboration, and sustainable change, one conversation at a time.